Hello, Internet friends, and welcome to Part 5 of the show with no names, Let's Read the Westing Game. When we last left off, there was a bomb in a coffee shop, and what do you know? Chapter 13, The Second Bomb. No one was in the kitchen of Shinhu's restaurant when the bomber set his tall can labeled monosodium glutamate behind similar cans on a shelf. The color-striped candle would burn down to the fuse at 6:30. Whoever was working there would be at the other end of the room. No one would be hurt. Due to unfortunate damage to the coffee shop, Shinhu's restaurant is prepared to satisfy all dinner accommodations. Order down or ride up to the 5th floor. Treat your taste buds to a scrumptious meal while feasting your eyes on the stunning snowscape before it melts away. Reasonable prices, too. Grace Wexler tacked her sign to the elevator wall as she rode up to the new job. She was going to be the seating hostess. "Where's the cook?" Mr. Hu shouted, meaning his wife. He found Madame Hu near the rear 4th floor apartment, kneeling before the bamboo trunk, fingering mementos from her childhood in China. He hurried her up to the kitchen, too hurried to find the words to explain what was happening. Now where was that lazy son of his? Doug jogged in from a tiring workout on the stairs. How was he supposed to know the restaurant would open early? Nobody bothered telling him. Some student you are, anyone with the brain of an anteater would figure that out. People are short on food, the coffee shop is closed for repairs. Stop arguing, go take a shower, and put on your busboy outfit. Get moving. Don't you think rather hard on the boy? Grace commented. Yes, because you are the perfect one to judge if someone is too hard on their kid. Somebody's got to give him a shove. If he had his way, he'd do nothing but run. Hu replied between bites of chocolate. You're not so easy on Angela either. Angela? Angela was born good, the perfect child. As for the other one, well, it's not easy being a parent, Mr. Hu said ruefully. You can say that again. Grace held her breath. Her husband would have done just that, said it again. Mr. Hu only nodded in shared sympathy. What a gentleman. What, is he going to cheat on her with Mr. Hu? Only Mr. and Mrs. Theodorakis ordered down. The other tenants of Sunset Towers lined up at the reservations desk, waiting for Grace Windsor Wexler to lead the way. Oversized menus clutched in her arms, Grace felt the first proud stirrings of power rush up from her pedicured toes to the very top curl of her head. How Uncle Sam could pair off people, so could she. You see your brother every day, Chris. How about eating with someone else for a change? She wheeled Boyd to the window table without waiting for an answer. It would have been yes. The two cripples together, Sidel Pulaski thought. She'd show that high and mighty hostess. She'd show all of them. She and Chris could have private jokes, too, and everybody would be sorry they weren't sitting with them. Chris was baffled by the strange words on the menu. I think it's boiled grasshopper. Sidel screwed up her face and Chris laughed. Or chocolate-covered mousse. French mouse, Chris offered. Now Sidel laughed. They both laughed heartily, but no one envied them. Your brother seems to be enjoying Miss Pulaski. Theo nodded, awed by the beautiful Angela, 3 years older than he, so fair-skinned and blonde, so unattainable. Here he was sitting at the very same table with her, just the two of them, and he couldn't think of a single thing to say that wasn't either stupid or childishly stupid. Usually the quiet one, Angela tried again. Are you planning to go to college next year? Theo nodded, then shook his head. Say something, idiot. I got a scholarship to Madison, but I'm not going. I'm going to work instead. What big, worried sky-blue eyes. The operation for Chris would be very expensive. That was worse. Now she's feeling sorry for him. If Chris had been born that way, maybe it wouldn't be so bad, but he was a perfectly normal kid. A great kid. And he's smart, too. About 4 years ago, he started to get clumsy. Just little things at first. Perhaps my fiancé can help. Angela bit her lip. Theo was not asking for charity. And fiancé, what an old-fashioned, silly word. I went to college for a year. I want to be a doctor, but, well, we don't have as much money as my mother pretends. Dad said he could manage if that's what he really wanted, but my mother said it's too difficult for a woman to get into medical school. Why was she grabbing like this? I want to be a writer, Theo said. That really sounded like kid stuff. Would you go back to college if you won the inheritance? Angela looked down. It was a question she did not want to answer, or could not answer. Long before becoming a judge, Josie Joe Ford had decided to stop smiling. Smiling without good reason was demeaning. A serious face put the smiler on defensive. A rare smile put a nervous witness at ease. She now bestowed one of her rare smiles on the dressmaker. I'm so glad we have this chance to become acquainted, Mrs. Bombeck. I had so little time to chat with my guests last night. It was a wonderful party. Laura Bombeck appeared even smaller and rounder than she was as she sat twisting her napkin with hands accustomed to being busy. Was her face permanently creased from years of pleasing customer, or was there a tragedy lurking behind that grin? Have you always specialized in wedding gowns? Mr. Bombeck and I had a shop for many years. Bombeck's for the bride and groom. Perhaps you've heard of it? I'm afraid not. Judge would have said no in any case, just to keep her witness talking. Perhaps you've heard of Flora's bridal gowns? That's what I call my shop after my husband left. I don't know much about groom's clothes. They're mostly rentals, anyway. Flora Bombeck lost her timidity, and the judge let her chat away. I'm using heirloom lace on the bodice of Angela's gown. It's been in my family for 3 generations. I wore it at my wedding, and I dreamed that someday I'd have a daughter who would wear it too, but Rosalie didn't come along until I was in my 40s, and the dressmaker stopped. The lips tightened to an even wider grin. Angela makes it a beautiful bride. Funny how he reminds me of her. Angela reminds you of your daughter? The judge said, Oh no, Angela reminds me of another young girl I made a wedding dress for. Violet Westing. The heavy trumps on Sidel Pulaski's bracelet clinked and clunked, and then raised a full fork of flourished it in a practice ritual before aiming it at her mouth. Chris's movements were even jerkier. She's a good person, he thought, but she thinks too much about herself. Maybe she's never had anybody to love. Here, let me help you to some of this delicious sweet and sour ostrich. Their laughter droned out the loud groan from another table while Turtle sat alone, transistor radio in her ear. The stock market had dropped another 12 points. I'm starved. Let's sit down to eat. Held high, Grace Wexler led her husband across the restaurant. All I want is a corned beef sandwich, not a guided tour. We'd prefer to sit alone with that young lady over there. I thought I was going to sit with you. Please be seated, Grace replied. Mr. Who, will take your order shortly. Jake snatched the menu from his wife and watched her glide, gracefully had to admit, to the reservations and whisper into Mr. Who's ear. Jimmy, she calls him. That's a fine kettle of fish, he exclaimed, and then turned to his dinner companion. Fine kettle of fish. I'm so hungry, even that sounds good. And from the looks of this menu, that's what I'm gonna get. I'm okay, Sir replied, the final prices of actively traded stops tumbling in her ear. Mr. Who waddled over. I recommend the striped bass. See, what did I tell you? A kettle of fish. Turtle switched off the radio. She'd heard enough bad news for one day. How about spare ribs done to a crisp? Who suggested. And then he lowered his voice. What's the point spread on that Packers game? See me later, Jake muttered. Go ahead and tell him, Daddy, Turtle said. I know you're a bookie. Ha! So we got one of them. Jake Wexler is the bookie, but we still don't know who the murderer is, the bomber is, or the mistake is. I hope the mistake is Grace. Can you stand on your legs? Sidel Pulaski asked. Can you walk at all? People never ask Chris those questions. They whisper them to his parents behind his back. No. Why? A better disguise for a thief or a murderer than a wheelchair. The perfect alibi. Chris enjoyed being taken for the criminal type. Now they really were friends. Why you read... What? Oh, reading my notes. Soon, very soon. Sidel daintily touched the corner of her mouth with her napkin, pushed back her chair, and then grabbed her polka dot crutch. What a superb meal. I must give my compliments to the chef. She rose, knocking the chair to the floor, and then clumped towards the kitchen door. Where is she going? Angela, starting to help up her partner, was distracted by shouting in the corridor. Hello in there, anybody home? Though the restaurant door came a bundled and booted figure. He danced an elephantine jig, stomping snow on the carpet, flung a long woolen scarf from his neck and yelled, Otis Amber is here, the roads are clear. And that's when the bomb went off. Nobody move, everybody stay where you are, Mizu shouted as he rushed into the sizzling, crackling kitchen. Just a little mishap, Grace Wexler explained, taking her command post in the middle of the restaurant. Nothing to worry about, eat up before your food gets cold. A cluster of red sparks hissed through the swinging kitchen door, kissed the ceiling, and rained a shimmering shower down on the petrified hostess. Fireflies of color faded into her honey blonde hair and scattered into ash on her feet. Nothing to worry about, she repeated hoarsely. Just celebrating Chinese New Year, Otis Amber shouted, adding one of his hee cackles. Mr. Who leaned through the kitchen doorway, his shiny straight black hair, even shinier and straighter, plastered to his forehead, water dribbling down his moon-shaped face. Call an ambulance, there's been an accident. Angela dashed past Mr. Who into the kitchen. Jake Wexler made the emergency telephone call and sent Theo to the lobby to direct the ambulance attendants. Why are you just standing there? Mr. Who shouted at his son. You told everybody to stay where they were. Doug said, You're not everybody. Madam Who tried to make the injured woman as comfortable as possible on the debris-strewn floor. Angela found the sequin spectacles, wiped off the wet, crystalline mess, and placed them on her partner's nose. Don't look so worried, Angela. I'm all right. Sidel was in pain, but she wanted the attention on her own terms, not as a hapless, foolish victim of fate. It looks like a fracture, the ambulance attendant said, feeling her right ankle. Careful how you lift her. The secretary suppressed a grunt. It was bad enough being drenched by the overhead sprinkler and draped with the noodles. Now they were carrying her right past them all. Grace pulled Angela away from the stretcher. You can visit your friend in a few days. Angela! Angela! said Elmone. Pride or not, she wanted her partner at her side. Angela stood between her determined mother and her distraught partner, paralyzed by the burden of choice. Go with your friend, Angie Pye, Jake Wexler said. Other voices chimed in. Go with Pulaski. Grace realized that she had lost. Perhaps she'd go to the hospital, Angela. It's been so long since you've seen your Dr. D. She winked mischievously, but only Flora Bomback smiled back. The policeman and the fire inspector visiting the scene agreed that it was nothing more than a gas explosion. Good thing the sprinkler sector worked, or Mr. Who might have had a good fire. What kind of fire is a good fire? Mr. Who wanted to know. And what about the burglaries? Grace Wexler asked. I'm with the bomb squad, the police exclaimed. I have to call the robbery detail for that. And what about the coffee shop accident? Theo asked. Also a gas explosion. Jake Wexler asked about the odds of having 2 gas explosions in 2 days in one building. Nothing unusual, the fireman replied, especially in weather like this. No ventilation, snow packed over the ducts. He instructed the tenants to air out their kitchens before lighting ovens. Mrs. Wexler turned up the heat in her apartment and kept the windows open for the next 3 days. She didn't want anything blowing up during Angela's party. But the Wexler apartment was exactly where the bomber planned to set the next bomb. Da da da! Bombs! Chapter 14. Pairs Repaired. The snowplows plowed and a warm sun finished the job of freeing the tenants of Sunset Towers and the figure in the Westinghouse from their wintry prisons. Angela, disguised in her mother's old beaver coat, hat, and turtle red boots, was the first one out. Following Siddell's instructions, he hastily searched under the hood of every car in the parking lot. Nothing was there. Nothing, that is, that didn't seem to belong to an automobile engine. So much for good grace from a spacious hood. Next came Flora Bomback. Behind her, a bootless turtle tiptoed through puddles. Miracle of miracles, the rusty and battered Chevy started, but the dressmaker's luck went downhill from there. First, the hood of her car flew up in the middle of traffic. Then, after 2 hours of watching mysterious symbols move across the lighted panel high on the wall of the broker's office, her eyes began to cross. After 3 hours, the grin faded from her face. Uh-oh. If Laura Bombeck stops smiling, you know things are getting hard. I'm getting dizzy, she said, shifting her position on the hardwood and folding chair. And worse yet, I think I got a splinter in my fanny. Look, here goes one of the stocks, Turtle replied. I don't know how this works. I'm just going to say what it looks like. SEA, $8.50. GM, $5,067. LVI, $32.25. MGC, $14. T, $1,065.25. AMI, $319.25. I, $822.50. I have no clue what any of that means. If you follow the stocks, you might know. Whatever. Flora Bombeck caught a glimpse of SEA $5 8.5 as it was about to magically disappear off the edge of the moving screen. Oh my, completely forgotten what that means, Turtle sighed. It means 500 shares of SEA was traded at $5.50 a share. What did we pay? Never mind, just write down the prices of our stocks as they cross the tape like I'm doing. Once school opens, it's all up to you. Turtle did not tell her partner that they bought 200 shares of SEA at $15.25 a share. On that stock alone, they had a loss of $1,350, not counting commissions. It took nerves of steel to play the stock market. Yeah, and a lot of patience, too. Mercedes is wiped clean and shiny like new, the doorman boasted. His face reddened around old scars as he rejected the folded $5 bill. No tips, Judge, please. Not after all you've done for the wife and me. The judge had given him the entire $10,000. J.J. Ford pocketed the bill and, to make amends for her thoughtless gesture, asked the doorman about his family. Sandy perched on the edge of the straight-backed chair, adjusted his round wireframe glasses, repaired at the bridge with adhesive tape across his broken nose, and told about his children. 2 boys still in high school, 1 daughter married and expecting their 3rd grandchild. Her husband had just lost his job, so they all moved in with us. Another daughter who works part-time as a typist. She plays piano real good. 2 sons who work in a brewery. Must be difficult supporting such a large family, the judge said. Not so bad. I picked up odd jobs here and there after I got fired from the Westing plant for trying to organize the union, but I mostly boxed. I was no middleweight contender, but I wasn't bad either. Got my face smashed up a few times too many, though. Still got some pretty bad headaches and my brain gets sort of fuzzy. Some dummy of a partner I got stuck with, huh, Judge? We'll do fine, partner. Judge Ford's attempt at familiarity fell flat. I did try to phone you, but your name's not listed. We don't have a phone anymore. I couldn't afford it with the kids making so many calls. But I did make some headway in our clues. Want to see? Sandy removed a paper from the inside of his cap and placed it on the desk. Judge Ford noticed a flask protruding from the pocket of his uniform, but his breath smelled like peppermint. The clues was figured out by Alexander McSuthers. Skies am shining brother. Skies. Sykes. Dr. Sykes witnessed the will. Am brother. Amber. Otis Amber. Shining. Shin. The middle name of James Sue, or what turtle kicks? Brother. Theo or Chris Theodorakis. Remarkable, the judge commented to Sandy's slight. However, we're looking for one name, not 6. Oh, gee, Judge, I forgot, Sam said dejectedly. Judge Ford told him about Theo's proposal, but Sandy refused to go along. It seems too easy, the clues adding up to one message, especially for a shrewd guy like Westing. Let's stick it out together, just the two of us. After all, I got the smartest partner out of all of them. Shallow flattery for the big tipper, the judge thought. McSuthers was not a stupid man, if only he'd been less obsequious, and less of a gossip. The doorman scratched his head. What I can't figure out, Judge, is why I'm one of the heirs, unless Sam Westing just up and died and there's no murderer. Unless Sam Westing is out to get somebody from his grave. I agree with you entirely, Mr. McSuthers. What we have to find out is who these 16 heirs are, and which one, as you say, was Westing out to get. Sandy beamed. They were going to play it his way. What you need is an advertising campaign. What I need is my half of the $10,000. $5,000 is what I estimate the redecorating the newspaper ads will cost. Get out of here! Get out! Grace stared at whose smooth, broad face, at the devilish tufts of eyebrows so high above those flashing eyes, and then turned her back and walked out. Sometimes she wondered about that man. No, he couldn't be the murderer. He couldn't even kill a water bug in the sink this morning. Grace spun around to see if she was being followed on the footstep-hushing carpet on the third floor hall. No one was there, but she heard voices. They were coming out of the kitchen. It was nothing, just Otis Amber shouting at Crow, something about losing their clues. I remember them, Otis. Crow replied in a soft voice. She felt strangely at peace. Just this morning she'd been given the chance to hide her love in Angela's bag. The big tapestry shoulder bag she carries next to her heart. Now she must pray that the boy comes back. I remember them, too. That's not the point, Otis Amber argued. What if somebody else finds them? Crow, are you listening to me? Crow! No, but Grace Wexler was listening. Really, Mr. Amber, can't you find another time to discuss your affairs with my cleaning woman? And where are you going, Crow? Crow was buttoned up in a black moth-eaten winter coat. A black shawl covered her head. It's freezing in here. Otis Amber shut the window. Grace opened the window. The last thing I need is a gas explosion, she replied previously. Boom! He replied. The two women were so startled that the delivery boy sneaked up on unsuspecting customers for the rest of the week, shouting, Boom! Besides shouting, Boom! Otis Amber delivered groceries up from the shopping center to Sunset Towers, back and forth, to and fro. Not only did the tenants have to restock their bare shelves, they had to add Westing paper products by the gross to their orders. Idiots, just because the will says buy Westing paper products, he muttered, having a bulky bag from the apartment attached to his bike. Even Crow is using Westing disposable diapers to polish the silver, and Westing paper towels to scrub their floors. Is that what happened to their clues? Poor Crow, she's taking this game harder than he had expected. She's been acting strange again. Boom! Otis Amber shouted as the intern hurried by. Idiot, muttered Denton Deer. Denton Deer paced on the floor. Listen, kid, I'd like to help you, but I'm only an intern specializing in plastic surgery. And it would be different if you wanted a nose job or a facelift. He had meant to be amusing, and it sounded cruel. Chris did not ask for charity. All he wanted was to play the game with the intern. All the intern wanted was half of the $10,000. Your brother suggested sharing clues. Sounds like a fine idea. No response. Maybe the kid thinks I'm the murderer. The tenants must think so, the way they peered over their shoulders, and that delivery boy shouting like that. Why me? I'm a doctor. I took an oath to save lives, not take them. You're not a doctor yet. You're an intern. I'm a very busy man, Chris. I have lots of sick people depending on me. Wait, I thought you specialized in plastic surgery. If they want plastic surgery, they're not sick. Oh well. Applying his fingers through his stringy mouse brown hair to keep it out of his eyes. When would he find time for a haircut? He seated himself next to the wheelchair. The clues are in my locker. What were they? The rain in Spain falls mainly on the plain. Grain shed. Chris spoke slowly. He practiced this recitation over and over, hour after lonely hour. Aw, poor Chris. grain. Oh, it is amber. For shed. Chi. Ford. Ford lives in 4D. Ford? Apartment 4D. Good thinking, Chris. The intern rose. Is that all? Chris decided not to tell him about the limper on the lawn. Not until next time. His partner would have to visit him a next time, and a next time, as long as he didn't sign the check. Now, how about signing that check? Dendier said. Chris shook his head. On a bench in the lobby, Angela embroidered her trousseau, waiting for Denton. Dad had tried to teach her to drive, but she was too timid, he too impatient. Why bother driving lessons, her mother said. Anyone as pretty as you can always find a handsome young man to chauffeur you. She should have insisted. She should have said no just once to her mother. Just once. It was too late now. Theo came in with an armload of books. Hey, Angela. I found that quotation, or rather, the librarian found it. You know, may God thy gold refine. Really? Angela thought it unnecessary to remind him that Flora Bomback and Turtle asked about the quotation, not her. What lush lips, what white teeth, what fine and shiny hair. Theo fumbled between the page of a chemistry book to look for the index card. On it was written the third verse of America the Beautiful. America, America, may God thy gold refine, till all success be nobleness, and every gain divine. Every gain divine. Theo had begun reading the refrain, then ended up singing it. He shyly laughed off his foolishness. I guess it doesn't have anything to do with the money or the will, just Uncle Sam's patriotism popping up again. Thank you, Theo. Angela stuffed her embroidery into the tapestry bag on seeing Denton Deer rush off the elevator. Hello, Dr. Deer. How about a game of chess? Let's go, the intern said, ignoring Theo. Sandy opened the front door for the couple, whistling America the Beautiful. The doorman was a good whistler, thanks to the chipped front tooth. I can't drive you home. I'm on duty tonight. I'll take a cab. Why must you go back to that hospital? Your crazy partner isn't dying, you know. She's not crazy. She made up her so-called wasting disease. I call that crazy. Nothing was wrong with her legs until the explosion in the Chinese restaurant. You're wrong. First you asked me to look in on her, now you don't want my opinion. And, I called in a psychiatrist. Maybe you should talk to him too. I've never seen you so troubled. What's wrong? Wedding dress isn't ready? The guest list is too long? You have to go with more important matters than that once you're married. Unless you don't want to get married. Is that it? Angela twisted the engagement ring her mother made her wear despite of the rash. No, she didn't want to get married. Not right away. But she couldn't say it. She couldn't tell them. Not like that. Den would be so hurt. Her mother... engagement ring was announced in the newspaper, the wedding gown, the shower. But once they found out that she wasn't their perfect Angela... How long had she been sitting in the hospital corridor? A man in a business suit, the psychiatrist, came out of Siddell's room. You must be Angela, he said. How had Siddell described her? Pretty young thing? I hear you're going to marry one of our interns. She was going to get married, her one claim to fame. How is Miss Pulaski, doctor? You mean you think she's crazy? Nope. No more or less than anyone else in this town. The crippling disease, she made that up? So what? The woman was lonely and wanted some attention, though she did something about it. Quite creatively, too. Those painted crutches were a touch of genius. Is that normal? I mean, is it not insane to shock people into noticing who you are? The doctor patted Angela's cheek as though she were a child. No one was hurt by a little deception. Now go in and say hello to your friend. Hello, Siddell. Without makeup, without jewelry, clothed only in a white hospital gown, she looked older, softer. She looked like a sad and homely human being. Talk to the doctor? It's a simple fracture. Angela replied. What else? Siddell turned her to face the wall. The doctor says your disease is incurable, but you could have a remission lasting 5 years, even more if you take good of yourself and don't overdo it. The doctor said that? Maybe people could be trusted. Did you bring my makeup? I must look like a mess. In her overstuffed tapestry bag under Siddell's domestic case, Angela found a letter. It was a strange letter, written in tense and rigid hand. Forgive me, my daughter. God bless you, my child. Delight in your love, and the devil take Dr. Dear. Hast thou found me, O mine enemy? The time draws near. Taped at the bottom were 2 clues. Thy beautiful. Chapter 15. Fact and Gossip. Friday was back to normal, if the actions of suspicious would-be heirs competing for a $200 million prize could be considered normal. At school, Theo studied, Doug who ran, and Turtle was sent to the principal's office twice for having been caught with a transistor radio in her ear. The coffee shop was full of diners. Shinhu's restaurant had reopened too, but no one came. J.J. Ford presided at the bench, and Sandy McSuthers presided at the front door, whistling, chatting, collecting tidbits of gossip, and adding some of his own. Flora Bomback, her strained eyes shielded by the dark glasses, drove Turtle to school on her way to the broker's office and picked up her late afternoon with sheets of prices copied from the moving tape. They had lost $3,000 in 4 days. Paper losses, Turtle said. Doesn't mean a thing. Besides, I didn't pick those stocks. Mr. Westing did. Did he? The dressmaker thought of the clues Tris had dropped. No stock symbol had 5 letters that even remotely resembled the word plane. But Flora Bomback played it fair and kept that secret to herself. 4 people stood in the driveway's melting snow, shivering as the sun dropped behind Sunset Towers. The 5th jogged in place. No smoke had risen from the chimney since that fateful Halloween. Still they stared up the Westing house, murder on their minds. He looked too peaceful to have been murdered, Cheryl said. She sneezed and Sandy handed her a Westing tissue. How would you know? Doug replied. How many people have you seen murdered? Turtle's right, her friend Sandy said. If Westing expected, he would have seen it coming. His face would have looked scared. Maybe he didn't see it coming, Theo argued. The killer was very cunning, Westing said. I heard a mystery once where the victim was allergic to bee stings and the murderer just let a bee in through an open window. The window wasn't open, Turtle said, wiping her nose. Besides, Westing would have heard the buzzing and jumped out of bed. Doug had an idea. Maybe the murderer injected bee venom in his veins. Otis Amber flung his arms in the air. Who said Sam Westing was allergic to bee stings? Doug tried again. How about snake venom? Or poison? Doctors know lots of poisons that can make it look like a heart attack. Turtle almost kicked Doug. Track meet or not. Her father was a doctor. She wouldn't mind if he had said interns. I once heard about a murderer who stabbed his victim with an icicle, the doorman said. It melted, leaving no trace of a murder weapon. That's a good one, Turtle exclaimed appreciatively. Sandy had had more. There was once a Roman who choked on a single goat hair someone put in his milk. And there was a Greek poet who was killed when an eagle dropped a tortoise on his bald head. Maybe Sam Westing was just sleeping until Turtle stumbled and fell on his head, Doug suggested. That's not funny, Doug who. How could she have ever had a crush on that disgusting jerk? Doug would not let up. And who was that suspicious person in red boots I saw opening the hoods of cars in the parking lot the other morning? He looked at Turtle's booted feet. The thief stole my boots and put them back again. They leak. A likely story, Tabitha Roof. Doug pulled her braid and then ran into the lobby at full speed. Sandy placed a large hand on Turtle's shoulder, a comforting hand, and a restraining one. Otis Amber hopped onto his bike. Can't stand around chit-chatting about a murderer that never happened. Sam Westing was a madman, insane, crazy as a bedbug. He pedaled off, shouting back, We ain't murderers. None of us. Theo could not agree. If there was no murderer, there was no answer, and without an answer, no one was going to win. Sandy, did anyone leave Sunset Towers on Halloween night before Turtle and Doug? The Roman scratched his head under his hat, thinking, One day seems like the next, people coming and going. I can't remember. Try. Sandy scratched harder. The only ones I recall are Otis Amber and Crow. They left together around 5 o'clock. Thanks. Theo hurried into the building to check his clues. Turtle had no reason to suspect Otis Amber or Crow or any of the heirs. Money was the answer. Her only problem was that dumb stock market and didn't want to play that game. Sandy, tell me another story. Okay, let's see. Once, long ago in the olden days, there was a soothsayer who predicted the day of his own death. The day came, the soothsayer waited to die and waited some more, but nothing happened. He was so surprised and so happy to be alive that he just laughed and laughed. Then, 1 minute to midnight, he suddenly died. He died laughing. He died laughing, Turtle repeated thoughtfully. That's profound, Sandy. Very profound. Where is everybody? The apartment was empty, as usual. Jake Wexler decided that Shin Hughes was going to have a paying customer. I like a table if you're not too crowded. I think I can squeeze you in, Mr. Hughes said, leading the podiatrist through the empty restaurant. You must have liked those spare ribs. Yeah, sure. Jake watched his wife slowly stack her new papers on the reservations desk. At last, seeming to recognize them, she walked over. Jake returned his unlit cigar to his pocket. Grace hated that smell. Wait, she hates the smell of cigars, yet we've established that she's a heavy smoker. Really? I don't even know how that's possible. I've already eaten, Grace said, sitting down. Hello to you, too, Jake replied. He probably thinks that's funny. Since when do people go around saying hello to your husbands? I don't think that's the point. We can add terrible husband to the list of reasons why Grace Wexler is awful. What's you with you, Grace? Where are the kids? And what are all those presents doing on the coffee table? It's not your birthday, and it's not our anniversary. What was she so upset about? Is it? No, it isn't. These are gifts for Angela. The wedding shower is tomorrow. Don't worry, you're not supposed to be there, just girls. The doorbell was ringing all morning, and I couldn't leave the apartment for an instant. One at a time he delivered them, the smirking fool, and each time he shouted, Boom! She looked especially attractive today, Jake thought. Between the ringing doorbell and the booms, it managed the time for the beauty parlor and the sun lamp. Mr. Who set the spare ribs on the table and lowered himself to a chair. Grace lost her scowl. Since you're here, Jake, I'd like your opinion on an advertising campaign I'm planning. Jimmy and I are having a slight disagreement. I say that Shinhu sounds like every other Chinese restaurant English-speaking ears. English-speaking ears? Jake bit his lip in an effort to keep silent. I say the restaurant needs a name people won't forget, Grace continued. I like the name Who's on First. Jake couldn't help himself. He tried to cover up a loud laugh with louder coughing. Who pounded him on the back and apologized for the ginger. You remember that old baseball routine, Jake? Grace prompted. Yes, he did. Who's on second? No, what's on second? Who's on first? Who's on first? Who? I don't know. Third base! What an idiotic name, Who argued. Who's on first sounds like my restaurant's on First Street, or worse yet, the first floor. Customers end up in the coffee shop drinking dishwater tea. Not the way I promote it, they won't. Grace insisted. Well, what's your opinion, Jake? The podiatrist put down the spare rib he was about to bite into. Who's on first is a dandy name. Before I could pick up the rib again, Who whisked the plate off the table. Who elected you, Judge, anyway? The judge returned to Sunset Towers with clippings from the newspaper's file. Faithful Sandy was waiting. Hoping to interrogate both George Theodorakis and James Shinhu, they alternated their dinner orders. One night they would order up, the next night they would order down. To their appointment, Judge Theo delivered up. They had no questions for him, but he had one for the doorman. Chess? Sandy replied. Sorry, I don't know the game. I'm a whiz at hearts, though. Shooter, they call me. Aw, Theo, give it up. Theo left them to their sandwiches and their work. The private detective the judge had hired was still investigating the heir, so tonight's project would be the Westing family. Judge Ford opened a thin folder on Mrs. Westing. Mrs. Westing, no first name, no maiden name. In the few newspaper photographs on which she had appeared, she was always with her husband. The captions read, Mr. and Mrs. Samuel W. Westing. The shadowy figure, a shy woman, seemed to slip behind her husband before the camera clicked, or had her face masked by a floppy hat brim. A slim woman dressed in the fashion of the time. A long, loose chemise, narrow soles with sharply pointed toes and high-spiked heels. A nervous woman. Her hands, especially in the later pictures, were blurred. In the final photograph, a black veil covered her face. She seemed to lean unsteadily against the stocky frame of her husband as they left for the cemetery. Sandy reported his findings. Jimmy Who never met Mrs. Westing. Neither did Flora Bombeck. She had Violet's fiancé brought her to the shop for fittings. He says it's bad luck for a groom to see the bride in the wedding gown before the wedding. I guess he's right. Well, that's it. Nobody else admits to have knowing Mrs. Westing except for me. You knew her, Mr. McSuthers? The judge asked. Well, not exactly, but I saw her once or twice. The old man described Mrs. Westing as a blonde, full-lipped, good figure, though on the skinny side. We'll say I recall those full lips because she had a mole right here. He pointed to the right corner of his mouth. Josephine did not remember a mole. She remembered copper-colored hair and thin lips, but that was so long ago, and, well, Mrs. Westing was white. Very white. What's that supposed to mean? What, does all white people look alike to her? That might be racist. Next, Westing's daughter. The judge studied the photograph under the headline. Violet Westing to marry senator. The senator turned out to be a state senator, a hack politician, now serving a 5-year jail term for bribery. Flora Bombeck was right about the resemblance. Violet Westing did look like Angela Wexler, and that was George Theodorakis, all right, dancing with her in society page clippings. What does it all mean, though, Judge? Sandy asked, squinting at the pictures through his smear glasses. Angela looks like Westing's daughter, and Theo looks like his father, the man Violet Westing really wanted to marry. How did you know that? Sandy shrugged. It was common gossip at the time. Westing's daughter killed herself rather than to have married that crooked politician. Now the judge remembered. Her mother has written her about the tragedy. Tell me, Mr. McSuthers, you seem to know what's going on in this building. Is Angela Wexler involved with Theo in any way? Oh, no. Sandy was certain of that. Angela and her intern seem happy enough with each other. At least, I hope so. I mean, if Sam Westing wanted to replay that terrible drama, Angela Wexler would have to die. So, is that drama gonna happen? Probably not. How is the bombing at Angela's party going? Will someone kill Grace Wexler? Gosh! Will Who's on First ever catch on? Will I ever stop asking dang questions at the end of these reviews? No one can tell. Find out next time on the Let's Read of The Westing Game.